This past week, my son Cade wrote a paper for his class on the archer fish. Maybe you guys have seen this little guy. Interesting little fish, 7 inches long, and it hunts food by shooting a stream of water, average of 2 to 3 feet, which is where kind of its range, but it can shoot up to like 10 feet. And its goal is to knock insects or small bugs off of hanging trees, branches, or reeds. They shoot the bugs off, they fall in the water, and this is how they get their dinner. And so everything in this small fish has to work together to be effective. From the small groove in the top of its mouth that creates the perfect straw to shoot the water, to the tongue that presses to the top of the mouth, just creating a perfect size and pressure to create this stream consistent with the distance of the prey. Its eyes that assess, they actually have to assess the refraction of water, because from their vantage point through water, that the bug isn't actually where they see it to be, and they're trying to judge distance, and then its gills create just the perfect amount of pressure to obtain the distance it needs, to its small little lateral fins that keep it in the right place, moving side to side, to its big tail that has to keep it moving forward, even within the current, so that it lines up with this perfect direction. And all of this stuff doesn't even account for the normal stuff that happens in every fish, things like blood flow, and then the DNA information transformation that has to happen, so that, it's not like these fish can practice this, like to get good at it, or they'll starve to death. This information has to be in there when they're born. Every part of this fish, even the smallest, unseen, seemingly insignificant part, must contribute to the function of the archer fish, or it dies. For the archer fish to survive and thrive, everything has to work together. Even the smallest little insignificant parts, they have to contribute, or the archer fish doesn't make it. Church, our Father works together with Son and Spirit. Out of his character, he creates everything working together in perfect order. Where does that come from? It comes from our God. He likes things to work together. It's who he is. And Father, Son, and Spirit work so seamlessly, so perfectly, they literally work as one being. This is Jesus' prayer for the church in John 17. Lord, may they be one as you and I are one. They love when things work together. This is what Paul is getting at in both his instruction and his prayers to the church of Ephesus that we've been reading about. And Paul says, in him you also are being built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. God loves for things to work together because he works together. Church, we are little children emulating our Father. You with me? We are little toddlers looking at our Father and say, we want to work together. We want to learn to work together. We want to learn to get past ourselves, to grow up, to be like you. And so last week we used this phrase to try to capture that, filled with all the fullness of God. If we want to be like God, this filled to the fullness means working with somebody else beside ourselves. His desire, his plan is for us to be filled with his fullness as a community. As a group of people mimicking him together, we have to have one another. We have to work together. Or like the archer fish, we will not make it. And as Paul says, we're being built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. And as Jesus says, that they may be one, Father, even as we are one, so that the world may know that you sent me. That the goal of all of this is for God to be put on display and for the world to say, God is awesome. And so we, being a church together, the goal is for us to work together just like God, so that the world will see and say, you guys uniquely work together just like your Father. That's the goal, church. And I would say we're growing, we're doing that. I think there's something about the church that, at least that I've been a part of, that hesitates to commend. Like we're scared to say, you guys are doing a really good job, as if somehow that communicates you don't have to do anything else. Church, we're not perfect. There's a lot of really good things going on here. I just want to encourage us in that. God is at work here. He's calling us past ourselves. It's a real gift. Let's do more of it. And to that end, working together to put his attributes on display, to that end, God has gifted his church. One of those gifts, this is what we talked about last week, are people who lead. People who have gifts to lead. God says, I want to gift the church so that it can accomplish and do what it's supposed to do. And in order for that to happen, I'm going to gift the church with people who have gifts. Their role is to use their gifts to serve the body by exercising oversight and equipping and teaching and preserving unity and aiding Christians in their maturity. And so as we were talking last week, Paul's ends. Just help with these here. Paul ends chapter 4 and ends verse 14. That was going to drive me crazy, by the way. With this, he ends verse 14 with this admonition to the application of the pastors, the shepherds, what they're to do. So this is what we focused on last week, starting in verse 11. And he gave up the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and the teachers to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, for the building up of the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. And so to that end, so that the church isn't all over the place theologically, and so that the church keeps moving and growing in maturity, to that end, God has given leaders to the church. And then in verse 15, this actually starts the church's role. How does the church respond to the leadership's direction? How do we respond to our leaders' gifts to do what they're supposed to do? How do we respond? Verse 15, rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. And in this short 2 verses, there are actually 6 joyful tasks that we get to perform or to grow into together as the body of Christ. That's all of us together. And by the way, the leaders are not exempt Paul does not exempt himself from this admonition. Look at in the middle of verse 15. He says this, the leaders, so back up context, verses 11 through 14, the leaders do this, they do this, and they do it for this reason, so the church isn't theologically all over the place. That's why the leaders do this, the leaders, they do this, they do that. Verse 15, we are to grow up. It changes here from what the leader is to do is to what we are to do. Paul is talking as a leader, of which he is one, and then he drops himself down into the rest of the body and says, we are to grow up. That means the leaders do their job of leading, and we as the church do our job responding to the gifts that Jesus has given us to lead the church. Here's how that works in our church. I am a leader here. I am not the leader. In other words, I use my gifts by leading in our church and even leading our elder team. But I am not the leader. And I am also in submission to the other leaders along with you. And so I submit myself to Bob, to Jason, and to Ian. I am in submission to them along with you, church. And we together, church, are to respond to their leadership by growing up, by working together to contribute our unique callings, our unique giftedness, to contribute that to the body in ways that we make what's happening here, we make each other grow. So again, there's 6 specific ways we contribute together as a church. Let me read the passage and listen. I want you to listen for them. So again, we're in Ephesians chapter 4. We're going to be reading verses 15 through 16. So look for these, I'm calling them joyful tasks. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. So here are our 6 joyful tasks, and then we're going to walk through them, okay? Speak truth. Grow up. Hold together. Be equipped. Work properly. And be built. That's what we get to do. Now this first one, speaking the truth, or full phrase, speaking the truth in love, this statement has really gotten quite a bad rap. It's been largely misunderstood. For most of us, this passage has meant to drop harsh truth bombs on somebody, and somewhere in the context of the conversation to say, I love you as sincerely as you possibly can muster. And many of us have been truthed in love before, like this, and we don't really like the memory. Verse 15 starts, rather. In other words, this is in contradiction or in comparison to something else. Paul's saying, don't do this, rather do something else. Don't be immature. Don't be tossed all about by the latest Christian theological fad. Don't be all over the place. Rather, do something else. Rather, speak the truth lovingly to one another. The Bible is saying here that we are to participate in the maturing process that our pastors and our shepherds are aiming at. We are to participate in that same truth and its application to one another. Are you with me? The pastors and the shepherds and the teachers are to be keeping us on track with truth. Church, the result of that should be, we should be learning and growing not to be all over the place, emotionally, theologically, but grounding ourselves, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit more here. But that's what we should be doing as we follow the leadership of the shepherds and teachers, but we are also to be speaking that same truth to one another. Not just, although it's part of it, not just confronting people in love, right? But it's way more than that. Our aim is to help one another apply truth. And again, we do that by not being easily swayed by doctrines that come and go, or Paul says that change direction like the wind, or be swayed by the latest Christian political buzz on social media, and we're all over the place, and no, don't do that. Don't start humming around with people in church and working yourselves up over stuff that comes and goes. No, speak truth to one another. You with me? Let's talk about Christ and what we have that's grounded and rooted, that's not going to change, regardless of the fact that our culture is doing this all the time. That's expected. We are not people that are rooted or grounded in this world, nor its political system. And so how do we fight against that? Is that we speak lovingly truth to one another. This is good, church. Yeah. But rather, Paul says, don't be all over the place, but rather protect one another by carrying the word into each other's lives. Through encouragement, hope, through exhortation, sometimes through confrontation. Confrontation is a lot easier to receive, true, when encouragement and hope has been a regular part of the diet, yeah? This phrase, speaking the truth, can be more accurately rendered truthing in love. We are to live out truth in application to one another as an aid to help each other in our maturity. And the result of this speaking the truth to one another in love is staying on track biblically, growing up and becoming like Jesus. That's the fruit of speaking the truth in love. It's not just not sinning, church. It's not just in you stopping doing things that I don't like, or wishing you would do things the way I like them better. That's how we've grown up manipulating people with speaking the truth in love. The goal is to help each other to become like Jesus. In other words, to be more mature or to grow up. So this is our second joyful task, is to grow up. Most of us heard this phrase, grow up or grow up, kind of like that. Maybe we've said it. But the phrase is more than just ridding oneself of immature behavior. The energy of our speaking truth is focused on the becoming like Jesus. That's the goal. It's not to stop doing stuff, but it's to become like Christ. That's the target for speaking the truth in love. And so Paul says, grow up in every way into him who is the head, Christ. That's the direction. We speak truth in love. Why? So that we can grow up into Christ. Start thinking about how that applies practically, church. This is you can apply this like during fellowship dinner. We can begin aiming our conversations always to, what does it look like for us to look like Christ? In the midst of our culture and the things going on and your pain and your difficulty, or your good time, or the blessings that you're receiving, or the illness that you're in, or the happiness that you're having, or the relational difficulties that you're facing. The goal is, how can we help each other focus on Christ in the middle? Speak truth in love and aim one another at our anchor, our head, our pastor, Christ Jesus. We love one another into maturity with our lives and our words. We love one another into maturity with our lives, truthing one another and our words, and using our unique giftedness to help each other in this process of becoming like Jesus. In other words, we really do want to be filled with the fullness of God. Not just me, all of us together. Filled with the fullness of God. Church, you realize we can sit across the table from people and we can consider, how do I help them be filled with the fullness of God regardless of their circumstance, or as a result, or in the midst of their circumstance? See, church, it's our affection and our desire to become like him and to help each other become like him where we find ourselves connected. It is the thing that holds us together, true? Our desire to be like him, and for our brothers and sisters' desire to be like him, that's what holds us together even when we're so different. Hear me. It's our relationship with Jesus that connects us to our relationship to one another. But it is also our relationship to one another where we use our gifts to strengthen the body, where we become like Jesus. Jesus holds us together, and then we hold one another to Jesus. In other words, our love relationship with one another is the atmosphere in which our gifts are exchanged. And in this exchanging of gifts, we are held together. And if I'm doing my job, and if you're following me, Paul says that the result of that being held together, that reality, of being held together is the result of lovingly speaking truth to one another that's rooted in the person of Christ. And so this is our third joyful task, is to hold together. So the passage continues, grow up into Christ, from whom the whole body is held together. This is why we can't be distracted by every wind of doctrine or human reasoning or false teachers or catchy Christian fads, because, church, none of those things holds us together. These third and fourth tier, remember in our concentric circles, these third and fourth tier theological issues that aren't the absolutes and they're not convictions, and these things out here, they do not hold us together. Christ at the center holds us together. And with our focus kept on him, and when we help each other keep our focus on him, and when we speak the truth in love to one another, helping each other to focus on him, we hold ourselves together. And so this is why the author of Hebrews encourages us this way. Let us consider how to stir one another up to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, because our love relationships together is the atmosphere in which we grow, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day drawing near. Hebrews 10:24. The Holman Bible Commentary says this: Jesus Christ allows each part of the body to mature and grow, not concentrating on special knowledge and growth for a favored few. Each of the parts of the body is needed to hold the whole body together in unity. The body is truly a maturing, loving body only as each part is encouraged to grow and to do its part of the work. So be equipped. Again, continuing, the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped. See, the church is not only gifted with leadership, but the church is gifted and equipped with all the parts necessary to do what we're supposed to do. So the gifting of leadership is one gift to the church, but the rest of the church is a gift to the church. And part of our role as a church together, as I said before, is to respond to the equipping ministry of our pastors and elders. Hebrews 13:17 says, "Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you." We are to respond to the equipping ministry of our pastors and elders. And like the archer fish has everything it needs to function and work, so we church are given all the gifts that we need in order to function and to do what God has called us to do, to live and to thrive. So everyone in, every member ministry. Every one of us is a gift. Say that. Every one of us is a gift. And everyone has a gift. Every one of us is a gift, and everyone has been given gifts so that Vine and Branch can do what God is calling us to do. Jesus has equipped the church, and the shepherds and pastors are to equip the church. And we are to recognize that we are here by design, the design of Jesus, and that we actively grow in our ability to be equipped and to do what God has called us to do. So that the church can be built and the world can go. I want to know who you know. I want to know who your Father is. We've been pulling some really good things out of our study, Experiencing God. We mentioned this when we had our meeting a few weeks ago. There's one thing that I'm not quite pleased with, but I just want to emphasize the positive part of it, and that is this. Not all big dreams are big dreams. Sometimes the smallest things are the greatest miracles. Doing small things that go unnoticed over long periods of time without complaint, with joy, that's a miracle. It is a miracle, and it is a really big deal. And not all dreams, not all God's dreams are big. Most of them, by the way, are small. We're reading Paul. He was a heavy hitter. There's how many in the New Testament? There's a few heavy hitters in the New Testament speaking to tens of thousands of mundane workers. Church, every one is a gift and has been given gifts, and we apply it moment by moment, minute by minute, and most often and most tangible in the smallest, most joy-receiving, most beneficial ways. Small increments, one step at a time. Sometimes big things, most often not. Small, little things. By the way, I see this happening all over our church. I mentioned this before. Just this week, I was just thinking, just this week, from Monday till Sunday, Chris went over to a man's house and helped him arrange his apartment so that he didn't lose his lease. They spent about 4 or 6 hours over there. Debbie picked up my mom, and they went and picked up a couple of girls and their grandmother and took them to the food pantry, and then they had a blast shopping. I love the fact that Debbie said, sign me up, Lynn, I'll help you. I was able to get done early this week because Jordan took over and took all of our songs and the stuff that I'm usually not that good at all, and she plugged it into the computer. I had everything done, including the handout, by Thursday. Guys, I'm just telling you, it was really helpful to me. Nick's organizing the music, so we're out 6 weeks on our music. So then him and I are working together on putting some of these readings together so that you can be blessed as a church. We've got one young lady going over to an older lady's house because she wants to help. And that elderly lady is saying, how can I train this woman in the ways of Jesus? And she's asking me for coaching on how to input. So you got older women teaching younger women. You've got phone calls with friends that are happening for hours, loving one another and learning to speak the truth to one another. We got a group of guys that are up fishing, and it's not just about fishing, although they're pretty excited about that, but they're really, hey, we're just really having a great time of fellowship. Thank you. Church, this is Monday through Sunday, just my view. That's a lot going on. And you can be looking for other things to be happening, and if it's not your shtick, you'll miss the things that are happening because there's a lot happening. Now, let me also give you a little bit of insight into the way we function as a leadership team. Write this down. There's 4 ways to learn, okay? You can put this in your notes. The first way is didactic. That's what's happening now. You're sitting, you're aimed at me, I'm teaching. It's called didactic. One person primarily, and you're the receivers. The next way is called facilitated. That's kind of like if I all of a sudden said, hey, let's everybody break up into groups and discuss what you just heard me say, and then you're going to come back and report to me what you heard me say. Now there's a little bit more interaction. It's a group dynamic, and the learning actually gets better, and you come back and report to me. So there's didactic learning, then there's facilitated learning. Then above that, there's contrived events. And this is a style of teaching, and this would be kind of like being out on a ropes course, where you're also hearing. So I used to run these ropes course events. You get people out there, business groups, you're teaching them truth, but they're doing it in a contrived environment. I put them on a ropes course. I control the ropes course. If something goes bad, I pull them down, take your helmet off, everybody take your carabiners, come on over here, gather around. It's a contrived environment, but I'm still in control of it. And then there's the natural environment. This is where nobody but God is in control, and we're all learning. This is why I used to teach, the organization that I used to work with would teach leadership development trips in the context of a canoe trip. Because the guy who was over me, my boss, had a doctorate in experiential learning. And he would say, the closer you get to natural learning, the more you actually learn. So the more effective learning is. And so in other words, when I'm teaching this way, sometimes this is a little bit discouraging, but statistically, okay, without the spirit, okay, statistically, and even with the spirit, you get about 20% of what I'm saying. That completely flip-flops when you get up to a natural environment. And so my boss did this thing where he could canoe trips, because the closer you can get to a natural learning environment, learning exponentially increases. And so the closer we can get people to natural learning environments, we're going to increase learning. So church, I'm just telling you, I want to give you an insight to the way we function as a leadership team. Our goal is to get didactic is helpful. It's what Jesus did. But his didactic teaching was very short, much shorter than mine. His natural teaching, boys, go out, do your thing, and then come back and we'll talk about it. Seriously? With that little training, what was he doing? He's getting them to natural environments because learning increases exponentially. Okay? And as a church, that's what we're after. I don't care. We don't care how much you know. If you're not applying what we know, then we're wasting our time. And so we're going to keep pushing each other, pushing us towards as many natural ways of learning as possible. That means life on life. Not just this is part of it, the didactic part. But let's get young ladies in the homes of older ladies. That's the way women teaching women happens. Let's get men in relationships to one another doing stuff and learning truth, because learning increases exponentially. Because what are we after? Filling our heads with theological knowledge? No, we're after actually living, acting, thinking, loving like Jesus, church. And so these things that I see you doing as a church, by the way, everything I've mentioned that about the things that I saw happen this week, that doesn't even include anything the elder team, the leadership team has done. I intentionally held that out because I just wanted that to be what I see you as a church doing. And I'm saying, church, we're not there yet, but we're getting there. And we're doing a pretty good job. Do more of that. In other words, work properly. It's our fifth joyful task. Peter says it better than I could. He has a great summary and application for what Paul is saying. We read it at the beginning. Peter says this: as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another. You are stewards of who you are and what you have. Use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's very grace. So whoever speaks, as one who speaks the oracles of God. Whoever serves, as one who serves by the strength that God supplies. Why? In order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. That's what we're doing. This isn't about us. This isn't about how to make a good church. This is about God being glorified through our leader, Jesus Christ, and that happens when we grow up into him and we serve one another. Paul has as well a great application, and he says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. Colossians chapter 3. Each one of us is a gift, and we have gifts to build up this body for the glory of Jesus, to put his attributes on display. And church, we find and we exercise what our gifts are in our relationships here. I'm not against spiritual gifts tests. They're okay. You can learn some things, but you need to take them to the church and apply them, or it will go away. It doesn't matter if you have the label if you don't apply it. And I'm going to say, you most clearly learn what your gifts are engaged here. You find and you exercise the gifts that you've been given, the gift that you are, by engaging Christ's church and community. And in that way, we are to be built. And this is not so much something that we do, but it's a fruit of what we've already done. So Paul continues, when each is working properly, makes the body grow as it builds itself up in love. This is the fruit. So when we're living out truth, when we're speaking the truth in love to one another, and we're growing up, and we're holding together, and we're being equipped, and we're working properly, the result is that we will be a community that is building itself up in love. It's the fruit. With Jesus as our cornerstone, We are being gathered together as a structure, joined together, growing into a holy temple in the Lord. And in Him, we are being built together into a dwelling place by which God dwells in His Spirit. You with me? No, let it sink in. Like, seriously, take a minute and think about it. I'm living in truth. I'm speaking, I'm learning, I'm growing up, I'm responding to the leadership of the elders. I'm taking it in, I'm holding together, I'm working properly. As we do that, as I do this with my brothers and sisters here, we become a place where God inhabits and puts His glory on display, and people will go, this is a unique community here. I want to know what you are all about. What a church is a gift. And again, Peter says, you yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. 1 Peter 2:5. And Jesus prays, I and them, you and me, that they may become perfectly one, so that the world may know that you sent me and loved them even as you have loved me. So speak the truth in love, grow up, hold together, be equipped, work properly, be built. Just want to encourage you by way of application. I just want to spend some time in this passage and then thinking through these 6 joyful tasks, and then just ask yourself, how am I doing? Is there an area that I'm like, oh man, I want to grow more in that area. I want to participate more by considering that and growing in that. So pick 1 or 2 areas that stand out to you and just grab a hold of a couple ways. So here's a couple for me as I've been thinking about this. The 2 that stick out to me by way of application are hold together and this hold together. Sorry, guys. Speaking the truth and holding together. It was really helpful to me to think about this idea of speaking truth in 3 different areas. Just giving people vision and encouragement, and then also help and exhortation. And to realize, I'm pretty good at the exhortation part. I really want to grow in the front end part. I really want to be able to speak truth in what I see that's going on in your lives, and not just think it and go, man, that's awesome, but actually say it to you when I see it. And to speak truth in love to you, my church, and say, keep it up. Great job. Good for you. Glory to Christ. I see Him in you. I want to do a better job at that. And I'm really encouraged, like, yeah, I want to do that. Right? And then the other thing is holding together. I really want to keep us focused on Jesus. In our culture, there's so much going on, and even in the Christian culture, there's all these doctrinal things that are resurfacing and swirling around. I really want to keep us holding together and focusing on Christ and keep us pointed in that direction. So if I'm pulling away 2 applications for me, that's what I'm taking away from today. What's yours? What's your area? Maybe you think, man, I didn't see that much going on, and I want to be able to see that more. I want to be equipped. I want to allow that to happen to me. Or maybe it's working properly. I've been so concerned about what my gifts are and thinking I don't have any, and I just want to get to work. What is your area? And just think through the list and ask God to show you, and then just pick a couple things and just say, man, by the grace of God, I'm going to work on that this week. Why? Because we're being built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. Father, to that end, we ask for your help, and we're thankful for your word, and we want to respond in all ways to you and to the truth that you're giving us, to be growing, to becoming more like Christ, to adjusting ourselves, to bending ourselves to your character, to your values, to your wants, to your desires. And so would you use this sermon, this teaching, this passage in our lives to help us to press in and to be encouraged, to be more like you, heading in your direction as our leader and blessing each other for the glory of Christ. Amen.